There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible to the outside world, when something inside you shifts. It doesn't arrive with clear answers. It doesn't shout. It doesn't offer reasons. Instead, it stirs gently beneath the surface. A faint discomfort. A sense that what once fit you so well now feels unfamiliar, heavy, tight. At first, you dismiss it. You tell yourself to be grateful. You tell yourself not to question the life you've built, the choices you've made, the roles you've accepted. And yet the feeling lingers. It follows you into places that once felt like home. It moves with you through conversations that once lit you up. It sits quietly at the edges of your achievements, whispering that something more is asking to be born. Carl Jung spoke of this quiet beginning, the point where the unconscious mind starts to make itself known, not through logic, but through unease. The stirring is not a sign that you are failing. It's a sign that you are growing. It's the earliest breath of a larger life pressing against the walls you didn't even realize you had built around yourself. This restlessness is sacred. It is your soul's first invitation to awaken. Not because something outside you is wrong, but because something inside you is ready. Ready to step beyond what you thought was possible. Ready to claim a truth you once buried beneath comfort or duty or fear. You might not know yet what will change. You might not even know what you truly want. But the stirring is real. It is asking you to listen. It is asking you to trust the discomfort, to see it not as a mistake, but as the quiet, undeniable beginning of your becoming. At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're tired, stressed, imagining things, but over time the truth becomes harder to deny. The life you are living, the roles you play, the relationships you maintain, the dreams you chase, no longer feel like home. The places you once felt alive now leave you empty. The conversations that once lit your spirit now exhaust you. The goals that once fueled you now feel strangely hollow. You try to recreate the old feelings. You reach for the familiar, hoping it will anchor you, but it doesn't. It slips through your hands like sand, because it no longer belongs to who you are becoming. Carl Jung understood that true growth creates friction. When your inner self evolves, but your outer life remains the same, you feel the pull, the unbearable tension between the person you were and the person you are meant to be. It's easy to blame yourself, to call yourself ungrateful, restless, irresponsible. But this dissonance is not failure. It is the inevitable result of outgrowing a life that was built for an earlier version of you. It served you once. It gave you what you needed once. But it cannot carry you forward into what comes next. You are not wrong for feeling this way. You are not selfish for wanting more. You are simply waking up to the fact that the container you built for yourself has become too small for the soul that now needs to breathe. Old friendships may begin to drift, not because of anger, but because you no longer speak the same language. Old dreams may lose their glow, not because you failed, but because they fulfilled their purpose. Old roles may feel suffocating because you are no longer willing to wear masks just to be accepted. This is not a crisis, it is a beginning. The beginning of a life shaped not by the person you were expected to be, but by the person you are ready to become. You were taught to fear discomfort, to see it as a sign that something is wrong, to fix it quickly, to smooth it over, to silence it with distraction or denial. But not all discomfort is a wound. Not all restlessness is a weakness. Sometimes discomfort is sacred. It is the soul's first language. It is the earliest signal that your inner world is outgrowing your outer one. Carl Jung spoke of this tension, the space between who you have been and who you are becoming, as the birthplace of true transformation. Restlessness is not your enemy, it is your invitation. It asks you to slow down, to listen, to feel the shifting ground beneath your feet, even if you cannot yet see where it leads. It is tempting to call it a problem to be solved. It is tempting to blame yourself for feeling unsteady, ungrateful, unfinished. But what if the restlessness is not a flaw? What if it is a signal of life still moving within you? What if the ache you feel is not evidence of failure, but proof that your spirit refuses to be contained by structures too small for it? The sacred restlessness stirs when you are ready. Not when life feels safe, but when life calls you to something deeper. It moves you beyond comfort zones. It pushes you out of silent agreements to stay small. It insists that you remember the parts of yourself you left behind for approval, for stability, for safety. You may not know where you are going yet. You may not even know exactly what you are leaving behind, but you feel it, and in that feeling, you are already stepping onto the path. This restlessness is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything. At first, you could pretend. You could move through familiar spaces, say the familiar words, wear the familiar smile. You could sit in conversations that no longer nourished you, perform the roles you outgrew, hold together the life you once built without questioning it too much. But slowly, then all at once, the space between your outer life and your inner truth becomes too wide to ignore. What once felt natural now feels forced. What once energized you now leaves you drained. What once seemed necessary now feels absurd. You find yourself struggling to laugh at jokes that used to amuse you, struggling to stay silent when your heart longs to speak, struggling to fit into spaces that feel colder every day. Carl Jung taught that when our outer world no longer matches our inner reality, the dissonance becomes unbearable. Not because you are broken, but because you are waking up. The life you are living may still look the same from the outside. The job, the relationships, the rhythms of the day, but inside something is shifting. Something is demanding honesty. It is no longer enough to simply go through the motions. It is no longer possible to fake contentment or loyalty or belonging. You may notice it first in small rebellions. A sudden unwillingness to nod along, an unexpected sharpness in your silence, a feeling of invisible distance even when surrounded by others. This dissonance is painful because part of you still wants to belong to the old life, still wants to keep the peace, still wants to protect the comfort of those around you. But deeper than that is a truth that will no longer allow itself to be buried. You realize that faking your life is a form of self-abandonment. You realize that staying silent is no longer noble. It is a kind of slow, invisible grief. And so, the dissonance becomes a teacher. It forces you to see clearly. It refuses to let you settle for half-truths. You can try to pretend a little longer, but eventually you reach the threshold. The place where pretending feels more painful than risking everything for something real. When you reach that place, you are closer than you have ever been to your true beginning. The world you once built is cracking open, not to punish you, but to finally let you breathe. As you change, your attachments begin to loosen, quietly, naturally, without force. You don't need to stage a confrontation. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone who no longer fits. You simply begin to drift away from what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. It happens in small, almost invisible ways at first. The conversations you once clung to lose their flavor. The people you once needed so desperately no longer feel like anchors. The routines that once defined you begin to feel foreign, even burdensome. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, as a natural unfolding, a slow, powerful emergence that requires the letting go of false securities and inherited roles. Attachments fall away not because you stop loving, but because you stop needing to hold on to what has already served its purpose. Some relationships will quietly fade. Some dreams will quietly release their grip. Some ambitions will quietly dissolve, not with drama or anger, but with a strange, deep calm. This is the soul's wisdom at work. You may feel guilt at first. Guilt for the spaces you are leaving. Guilt for the expectations you can no longer fulfill. But guilt here is only the echo of an old self still trying to belong to a world you have already begun to outgrow. You are not betraying anyone. You are answering the deeper loyalty you owe to yourself. The shedding of attachments is not an act of destruction, it is an act of trust. Trust that life will carry you forward even when you loosen your grip on what is familiar. Trust that what is real will remain. Trust that what falls away was never meant to accompany you into the next chapter. You may grieve, you may long, briefly, for the simplicity of the old life, but something inside you knows that you can no longer shrink yourself to fit a past that no longer matches your future. This is not selfishness, this is evolution, and every attachment that falls away leaves you lighter, freer, closer to your own essence. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding everything that is not truly yours, and in that quiet surrender, you are becoming someone new, someone closer to the truth you were always meant to live. If this story felt like it was speaking directly to a moment you're living through now, where things fall apart so something truer can rise, know this: you are not lost. You are being guided. Subscribing keeps you close to stories like this, stories that don't rush healing but honor it step by quiet step. And if you know someone standing in their own storm, unsure of what comes next, consider sharing this message. It might be the reminder they need. Not everything that breaks is a failure. Some things break open to let the real life in. When you begin to let go of the life you've outgrown, guilt will come looking for you. It will whisper that you are abandoning those who once depended on you. It will tell you that you are ungrateful for the dreams you are now setting down. It will accuse you of being selfish, reckless, disloyal. Guilt is the voice of the old life, making one last desperate attempt to pull you back. Carl Jung understood that when we shift into a new stage of life, the old structures of meaning do not surrender quietly. They resist, they plead. They demand that you explain yourself, justify yourself, doubt yourself. You will feel the weight of dreams you once cherished. Dreams that once gave you hope, now becoming too small to contain who you are becoming. You will remember the promises you once made in moments when you didn't yet know how much you would grow. You will look at the people you love and feel a sharp grief at the widening space between you. But this guilt is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are crossing a threshold few dare to cross. It is the valley between the old life and the new, a place where you must walk alone for a while, carrying only your honesty, your courage, and your willingness to trust what you feel. You are not betraying anyone by growing. You are not abandoning anyone by telling the truth about what you can no longer pretend. Growth is not a rejection of love. It is an honoring of love's highest form, the freedom to be who you truly are. You do not have to destroy what was good about the past. You only have to bless it and let it rest. As you move through the valley of guilt and fear, remember, your first and deepest loyalty is to the life that is trying to emerge through you. And no one, not even the parts of yourself you are leaving behind, can take that away. There's a part of you that already knows. It knows what no longer fits. It knows what no longer nourishes you. And it knows what is quietly waiting beyond the edge of your current life. But the knowing doesn't come with a map. It doesn't offer timelines or guarantees. It offers only a pull, a gentle, persistent pull towards something you cannot yet name. This is where trust begins. Not the kind of trust you were taught, not trust in outcomes or promises, but trust in your own inner movement. Trust in the quiet unfolding of something deeper than logic. Carl Jung believed that the soul leads from underneath, not through loud declarations, but through symbols, emotions, intuition, dreams. And when your soul begins to shift direction, your outer world doesn't change immediately. There is a space in between, where everything feels unfamiliar and nothing yet feels solid. In this space, your task is not to figure it all out. Your task is to listen, to honor the movement even when you do not understand it, to stay with the feeling even when you cannot explain it. You are not meant to see the full path, only the next step. And often, that step is small, a choice to rest when you'd rather numb, a conversation you no longer avoid, a truth you finally admit, even if only to yourself. This is how transformation begins, not with certainty, but with permission. Permission to trust what is invisible. Permission to believe that your soul knows something your mind cannot yet grasp. You are not lost. You are being guided by something old, something true, something unshakable within you. You do not have to see the whole future. You only have to trust the part of you that refuses to remain the same. It doesn't happen all at once. The emergence of your true self begins quietly, in moments so subtle they might go unnoticed by the world around you. You speak a truth you once swallowed. You say no without apology. You sit with your discomfort instead of escaping it. No fireworks, no applause, just a quiet shift in direction, an internal alignment that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Carl Jung believed that the true self lives beneath the roles, the masks, the adaptations. It waits patiently, beneath all the identities you built to survive, beneath the person you became to be accepted, to belong, to feel safe. And when the masks begin to fall away, when the roles begin to crumble, something deeper begins to rise. You may not even recognize it at first. It feels unfamiliar because it was buried. It feels vulnerable because it is real, but it also feels steady, honest, alive. You stop needing to perform. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never really listening. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You begin to hear your own voice beneath the noise, the voice that says, "This is what I value. This is what I need. This is what I can no longer pretend to be." This emergence does not always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like grief, because with every layer that falls away, a part of your past goes with it. But this is how the self returns, not through struggle, but through surrender. You stop fighting who you are. You stop resisting what you know. You stop chasing what was never meant to stay. And in that stopping, you begin. You begin to feel a strange kind of peace. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become more real within it. You carry yourself differently, not louder, but clearer. Not harder, but more whole. And though the world may still expect the older version of you to show up, you no longer feel responsible for keeping that illusion alive. You are not abandoning your life. You are returning to it as the person you were always meant to be. When your life begins to change, it rarely asks for your permission. Instead, it rearranges itself around you, quietly at first, then all at once. What once felt secure begins to dissolve. Plans fall apart, connections fade, opportunities vanish without explanation, and you are left wondering, what did I do wrong? But this is not punishment, this is realignment. Carl Jung understood that the psyche, when ready to grow, disrupts anything that prevents your becoming. The chaos is not random, it is precision, disguised as loss. You may grieve what falls away. You may cling to the old structures, the job that once defined you, the relationship that once sustained you, the version of yourself that once made sense in a world you no longer recognize. But the more you cling, the more it slips from your grasp, not to harm you, but because it is no longer where your life wants to go. Disruption is a clearing. It is life removing what you no longer have the courage to release on your own. It strips away the roles that keep you small. It dismantles the illusions you needed to feel safe. It breaks apart what was never built to last, so something truer can take its place. At first it feels like destruction. You may feel untethered, afraid, adrift. But beneath the fear is an opening, a space that was never available before because it was buried beneath too much noise, too many expectations. Now it's bare, now it's honest, now it's yours to shape. New doors begin to appear, not dramatic ones, but quiet invitations. A conversation that stirs something deep, a thought that won't leave you alone. A decision you finally make without apology. Disruption clears the way for these things. It shakes the ground beneath what is false, so that only what is real remains. You might not feel ready. You might want the old life back, even if it never fully fit. But life has already moved, and now so must you. This is the part no one talks about, the sacred mess, the holy unraveling. It's where the old world ends, not with a scream, but with a slow disassembly of everything that once held you. Let it fall. Let what no longer fits collapse in its own time. Do not rush to rebuild. Do not rush to replace. Just stand in the space that's been cleared. Breathe into it. Let it teach you who you are without the things you once used to define yourself. And watch as something unexpected begins to grow right where the chaos left you open. There comes a point when the peace you once accepted no longer feels peaceful. You used to smile through discomfort. You used to stay silent to keep the balance. You used to tolerate half-hearted conversations, surface-level friendships, small betrayals, because it seemed easier than conflict. That was survival. That was adaptation. But now, something in you refuses. Not with rage, not with violence, but with stillness, with clarity. Carl Jung wrote that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And one of the clearest disguises is false peace, a sense of calm that only exists because you've buried too much of yourself to keep it. You begin to feel allergic to dishonesty, to manipulation dressed as kindness, to the subtle games people play when they're afraid to tell the truth. What once slipped past you now feels heavy in the room. You see it in the way people avoid their own truths. You feel it when the energy in the conversation dips, when no one is saying what they actually mean, and you can't pretend anymore. You stop laughing when you don't find it funny. You stop nodding when you disagree. You stop playing the version of yourself that others are comfortable with, because it's no longer who you are. This doesn't mean you've become bitter. It means you've become awake. You realize that anything built on pretense will always ask you to shrink. That false peace isn't peace at all. It's a silent form of control. You no longer have the energy to maintain what doesn't feel true, not because you're angry, but because you're done betraying yourself. And that's what this shift is about. Not rebellion, not resistance, but quiet refusal. A refusal to play small to keep the room calm. A refusal to smile your way through emotional dishonesty. A refusal to make yourself less inconvenient just to stay in spaces that don't see you. You no longer crave the kind of peace that costs you your wholeness. You want the peace that comes from truth, even when that truth is disruptive, even when it requires change. And that means saying no, walking away, or standing still while everything around you shifts. Not because you want drama, but because you're finally done participating in the lie. Restlessness, discomfort, the sense that who you are becoming no longer fits where you've been. If today's reflection helped give those feelings a name, subscribing means staying close to a space that honors that deep, invisible work. And if someone you love is struggling silently, searching for permission to let go, to grow, to trust themselves again, sharing this may be the sign they didn't know they were waiting for. Because no one should have to walk the road of awakening, believing they're alone. There was a time when you searched for safety in all the usual places, in other people, in routines, in titles, outcomes, approval. You built your life on what you could predict, what others accepted, what felt firm enough to stand on. But now, the ground has shifted. What once felt solid has crumbled. What once brought comfort now feels brittle. What once held you up now asks too much in return. And in the space left behind, you begin to ask a quieter, deeper question. Where does my stability actually live? Carl Jung spoke often about the importance of the inner foundation, a rootedness in the self that does not depend on the outer world for definition or reassurance. And now, for the first time, you begin to understand what that means. You stop waiting for the world to reflect your worth back to you. You stop chasing relationships that prove you're lovable. You stop tying your identity to how much you achieve, how little you feel, how well you perform under pressure. Instead, you start turning inward. You find steadiness in the morning silence before the world begins. You find grounding in your own breath, your own honesty, your own willingness to show up as you are. This is the beginning of something powerful. Not a life without storms, but a life where the storms no longer shake your core. You may still be moved, but you are no longer unmoored. You may still face uncertainty, but you are no longer defined by it. Because now, your stability doesn't live in what stays or what leaves. It doesn't depend on whether others approve or understand. It lives in the quiet place inside you that knows who you are, even when everything else is shifting. And once you've felt that, once you've touched that calm beneath the noise, you don't forget it. You return to it. You build from it. And piece by piece, you begin to create a life that cannot be taken from you. There was a time when everything got a reaction out of you. An insult, a misunderstanding, a dismissal that cut too close. You felt compelled to explain, to defend, to prove your worth over and over again. It was exhausting, because you were living in a world that constantly asked you to justify your existence. But slowly, something shifts. You begin to feel the power of silence, not as avoidance, but as mastery. Carl Jung believed that our shadow, the hidden reactive part of the psyche, loses its grip when it's seen, accepted, and no longer feared. And now you're beginning to live that truth. You no longer need to respond to every judgment. You no longer hand your peace to every passing comment, every misinterpretation, every provocation. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to be right in every room. You don't need to convince those who were never open to hearing you, not because you're cold, but because you're centered. You've learned that true strength isn't loud. It doesn't rush to defend its territory. It doesn't flinch at being misunderstood. True strength watches. True strength breathes. True strength chooses when to speak and when to walk away. You've stopped reacting because you've stopped needing permission to be who you are. You've stopped needing validation to trust what you know. You've stopped expecting the world to reflect your truth because you've already found it inside. This isn't about indifference. It's about sovereignty. You still feel, you still care. But your energy is no longer up for auction. You give it where it belongs, to growth, to stillness, to relationships rooted in honesty. You've realized that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every fire is worth your breath. And sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. That is the moment you step out of the loop, out of the roles that kept you locked in reaction, out of the endless proving, pleasing, explaining, and into something quieter, wiser, untouchable. Because once you've tasted the strength of your own stillness, you no longer chase the noise. You carry the kind of peace that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And that, more than anything, is what freedom feels like. It may not look like a blessing. At first, the storm feels like collapse. Something breaks, someone leaves, a door slams shut where you thought one would open. You question everything, your timing, your choices, your path. You wonder if you've failed. You wonder if you're being punished. You wonder if you're just not meant for the life you hope for. But Carl Jung taught that what feels like chaos is often the psyche's way of cleansing itself, clearing what must fall away so something more honest can emerge. The storm is not an accident. It's an acceleration, a spiritual intervention when you've lingered too long in something too small. It begins by stripping away what no longer serves you. Not gently, because gently didn't work, because you've ignored the signs, because you kept choosing what was safe instead of what was true. Now, life steps in to make the decision for you. You lose the job. The relationship fractures, the role you once played no longer fits, and you're left standing in the debris, raw, uncertain, exposed. But this is the sacred part. This is the truth behind the storm. It's clearing space. It's removing what cannot survive the next version of you. It's shaking loose every attachment that would only hold you back from the path you're being called to walk. You're not being punished. You're being realigned. Yes, it hurts. But the pain is precise. The losses are meaningful. The cracks are placed exactly where light will need to enter later. You're not meant to understand it all yet. You're meant to stay with yourself through it. Let the storm pass through you. Let it pull away what no longer belongs. Let it take the mask, the expectation, the illusion. What remains, what cannot be taken, will be your foundation. There will come a time when you look back at this season and see the intelligence in the destruction. You'll realize the storm didn't break you. It broke the version of your life that was too small to contain who you were becoming. The storm didn't block your path. It cleared it. And though you may feel scattered now, though the dust hasn't settled, there is something undeniable rising in the silence afterward. Clarity, space, the beginning of something real. So don't rush to rebuild. Wait, listen, let the ground speak again. Because what comes next will not be a reconstruction of the old. It will be the life that finally fits the truth of who you are. There comes a point in your healing When things that used to shake you no longer reach you in the same way. The insults lose their grip. The silence no longer feels like rejection. The drama that once pulled you in now passes by like a wave that no longer crashes against your shore, not because you've grown hard, but because you've grown whole. Carl Jung believed that true strength comes not from armor, but from integration, when you no longer run from the parts of yourself that once frightened you, when you no longer outsource your worth to anything external. You don't become untouchable by numbing out. You become untouchable by knowing exactly who you are and refusing to collapse every time someone else forgets. You've stopped defending yourself because you've stopped seeing yourself as something that needs defending. You don't need to prove your intentions. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to be liked by everyone who crosses your path. Your peace no longer depends on that. There's a calm now that lives in your bones, a stillness that does not announce itself, but radiates through the way you hold your gaze, the way you move through conflict without losing your center. You're not reactive because your worth isn't up for debate anymore. You no longer need to over-explain, over-apologize, or over-function. You simply show up, fully, quietly, honestly. And when something doesn't resonate, you leave, not with bitterness, but with clarity. This is what it means to become untouchable, not invincible, not unreachable, but deeply rooted. So rooted, in fact, that the winds of judgment, chaos, or change no longer uproot your inner world. People may still misunderstand you. Life may still bring loss. But now you carry something stronger than control. You carry self-trust. And that trust becomes a sanctuary. Not because life stops challenging you, but because you no longer abandon yourself in the process. This quiet resilience isn't loud. It doesn't demand to be seen. But it changes everything. It is the unshakable foundation that lets you walk forward, not afraid of the world, but anchored deeply within your own. You may not recognize the place you're standing in right now. So much of what once defined you has fallen away. Old attachments, old identities, even the old version of yourself that clung to what no longer fits. It can feel like collapse, like failure, like you've lost more than you've gained. But look closer. Your life is not falling apart. Your life is being reshaped from the inside out. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And now you're seeing it. What once controlled you is dissolving because you've chosen to see it. What once imprisoned you is breaking because you've chosen to outgrow it. This isn't destruction. This is dismantling of everything false, inherited, borrowed, or forced. It's terrifying because it's unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means new. It means necessary. You're not breaking. You're opening. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not being pushed out of your life. You're being invited back into it with more honesty, more depth, more truth than ever before. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, the road ahead is unclear, but pain is not the enemy. Pain is the messenger. It arrives when you've stayed too long in a version of yourself that's no longer alive. It arrives when it's time to move, to evolve, to remember. You are being born again, not into someone new, but into the person you were always meant to be, beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the survival. And birth is not gentle. It tears, it breaks, it sheds. But what comes after is breath, real breath, full breath, the kind you don't have to earn by being someone else. Your life is not over. Your life is beginning again, with different eyes, with steadier hands, with a self you can finally trust to carry you. You don't have to understand the entire map. You only have to take the next honest step, because life has not abandoned you. It has waited, patiently, powerfully, for the moment you would finally come home to yourself, and that moment is now. Sometimes the real turning point doesn't look dramatic. It looks like silence, like no longer pretending, like the courage to stop explaining yourself. If this story helped you feel understood in that in-between space, where the old life is dissolving and the new hasn't yet arrived, consider subscribing. And if there's someone in your world who's outgrowing their old self and doesn't know what to call it yet, you can share this with them. Because growth doesn't always need a loud beginning. It just needs to be honored.